Hey everybody, welcome to another Deck Tech with Casters of the Cards. I'm William, and I'm joined with.
Austin, and today we're talking about your deck, Meren of Clan Nel Toth.
Yep, another one of our $50 budget decks. And let's get right into what Meren does. Meren's got a fun mechanic that's only on, I believe, 9 commanders. So you don't see it very often. Well, you wouldn't if Meren wasn't one of the highest ranked commanders, but we'll talk about that later. It's a Golgari, 4 mana, 3/4. Whenever another creature you control dies, you get an experience counter. Now, explain how those experience counters work, Oston.
Yeah, so you've got this card, and it says place your experience counters here, and that's how it works.
Well, how are those counters different
Nah,
from
I'm just joking.
any of?
I'm just pulling your leg. Uh,
Oh,
those counters are very close to a emblem. So think about an emblem, and if you don't know what an emblem is, then I mean you're just really not gonna vibe with these experience counters, anyways. These are counters that are placed on a person, a player, and they can't be interacted with, which means you put them on you, and you've got them there for the rest of the game. So you kind of want to get them on there pretty quick. And once you have them on there, you get to do Marin's ability, which cares about how many
right.
you have.
Yeah, so because experience counters, once you earn them, they never go away. It creates an interesting thing of even if you lose your commander later in the game, she comes back and it's still the same power level essentially as it was
She's
before.
experienced. She's got the experience. It transcends the card.
And that experience lets us, at the beginning of our end step, choose a target creature in our graveyard that has mana value less than or equal the number of experience counters and return it to the battlefield. Otherwise, return it to your hand. So not only does this say that if you have, one or if you have a number of experience, you can get that creature right back on the battlefield, but you can even get something bigger. And there's some cards in this deck where even if you don't have the right amount of experience counters, you can still make pretty good advantage of having them in your hand. And we'll talk about those here in one of the later slides.
Yeah, and that's really big too because if you could only bring back creatures equal to your experience counters and you could not put them back into your hand, I don't think she'd be very good because you sometimes it takes a while to get to like 10 experience counters, but you might want like a Eldrazi. So
Right. So let's see. Obviously, the main strategy in this deck is going to be reanimation, and while Meren does it very good, we have some redundancy here. Ignore the massacre worm. I forgot to take that off this page. But
no,
all
no,
these creatures
I mean that's
more creatures onto the battlefield.
you want to
Um,
reanimate him so he can be here.
you you well. So in a later slide we'll show you what you really want to reanimate. Now these guys just help you do more reanimation.
Massacre Worm's probably on that slide too, huh?
Massacre Worm should have been on this side. That's why I'm drawing attention to it now. But things like Sepulchre Primordial, Jinji, Burning Rune Demon, Rush. How do you say it? Rush.
Rash
Rack.
Rackshaw Debaser.
Rakshas. Yeah. They're all going to be very good targets. They're higher costed cards, so they get bigger bodies, and most of them get a card out of any graveyard onto the battlefield. So the idea here is that you're gonna mill or draw enough cards that you put some in your graveyard, and then Marin's gonna get, let's say, Jinji back, and so then when Jinji's a bad example, Sepulchre Primordial comes back, it's gonna get Jinji. So you're gonna get a few cards at a time. So doubling up on the reanimation kind of starts building an engine, especially late game.
Yeah, well, and as you might know, there are some pros and cons whenever it comes to reanimation as a theme in general. So why don't we take a look at some of those real quick, and we can talk about how Marin kind of helps that out.
So as we talked about it a little bit before, the experience counters, they never go away. So once you get built up to, I think 8 is the highest mana cost of a card to have in this deck. Once you get experience 8, well, then you know that as long as Meren's on the field, every turn you can get anything you'd like back from your grave. Uh, and there's no way your opponents can stop that. So it's pretty good. Uh, can reanimate several threats in a turn, as I was explaining there, where you can kind of chain a reanimation creature into another one, and it's pretty consistent. Because 4 mana is not too high, and we're in green, we're able to use a lot of creature-based ramp, which we'll see in a second. And we could use those creature-based ramp as fodder. So once we cast Meren, we sack them, we quickly build up our experience, and you're set. And there's enough redundancy of everything that it just kind of flows pretty easily. You don't ever have to worry about hitting what you need too often.
Yeah, and then some of the cons to this, unfortunately, though, are definitely going to be you kind of have a slow start whenever it comes to getting everything set up on the board. You're going to have some weaker stuff, but then you want to get all your big stuff out, but you've got to kind of get it into the graveyard to begin with, and then sometimes you've got to get experience counters on Meren. So it's kind of a two-step process with a reanimation strategy in general.
I'll
That
say. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say that also makes it the next point where it's hard to keep targets in the grave is like a reanimation strategy has an issue with. Your grave is kind of open and it's public knowledge and it's interactable with, unlike the experience counters. So with the reanimation in general, people are kind of they're gonna kind of have an idea of what's going on here, so they're gonna maybe want to do something about that.
Right, and then a personal problem with the way I built this deck is I've got quite a few cards that draw cards in exchange for life, and since there's not a lot of life gain, I tend to run low on life, and a lot of it's self-inflicted in this kind of deck. You could definitely build around that, but I personally find that some of the better draw cards in the budget are gonna be the ones that deal damage to yourself. And since we'll see, one of my cards is when it enters, lose 2 life, draw 2 cards. Well, if you repeat that with Meren every single turn, yeah, you're gonna draw 2 cards every turn, but you're also gonna lose life. So you kind of gotta watch that and not overdo it. But otherwise, um, I think Meren definitely has more pros than cons here. And let's look at what's in
I'll
the deck.
convince you to put that Palaka worm in here one day where you can draw a card and gain 7 life.
We'll see. I
You've
I, I
got
will
20
emulate that.
strong reanimation targets to consider that Palaka worm going in.
Yeah, 20 strong reanimator targets. I'm more meaning um your the things that reanimate other things, or just big bodies, anything that could get you towards winning the game. That's what you're going to want. Obviously, I've got 14 sack outlets and 6 mill. Both of these in different ways help to fill up that grave so that you can, one, sacking lets you do your experience counters, but it puts a creature in your grave, and milling also puts creatures in your graves, and you're going to need to do that, as we said, in order to keep that grave full. Um, 13 targeted disruption. I was able to lean a little higher on this deck than normal. 6 mass interaction. Um, 16 draw. Now, a lot of that's just
That does seem a
draw
little high.
card. It is a little higher because normally I wouldn't count a card that when it ETBs you draw a card as draw. I'd count that more as like a looting, or like a just kind of breaking even. But in this kind of deck, because you can abuse those creatures that only draw you 1 card, I think it's more significant. So that's why this number's a little higher than um,
And I see
14
your
ramp and 35 land. 35 lands is a
shame.
little low. I'm definitely gonna look to improve that, but in my playing, it's been pretty consistently sufficient.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think so. Definitely. Not only probably because of that draw, but you're also in green, so the ramp that you do have usually gets you double the ramp other people have access to outside of green, and I think that would probably make up for it for the most part.
so Magic or Wizards of the Coast suggests that this deck is a bracket of one.
Officially now that it's been handed over, officially.
I have I have no infinite combos, game changers, or anything that's like, oh my gosh, you're blowing up lands. None of that in this
You're
deck.
not taking any extra turns. Oh my gosh.
No extra turns. However, the ability to reanimate is something that the rules like. I do feel like that's a level of card advantage that isn't currently looked at in the bracket. Um, and then you couple that with the fact that the experience counters are not interactable. Definitely this deck is stronger than a level one, I would say.
For
I don't
sure,
know
I
if you
think so.
agree with
I
that.
I this deck originally was a precon when Meren was released, as most of the other experience counter legends were. But you've definitely your deck doesn't look anything like the precon. It's
No.
definitely streamlined. It's focused. Just looking over here on the side, like you know your business. You know, other than a few lands shy here, like you're not. You're probably not in bracket one. Um, you don't have, and because we do a budget, obviously you don't have any of the power game changers, so you don't get to count those. But I wouldn't. I'd say you're at a high three and maybe even a four. Maybe just a
I'd
three
definitely
because
say
of the interactability of the. It's a creature based deck. You know what I mean? Like,
right, creature based deck, graveyard based deck. It's definitely gonna have hard matchups. So I think three would be where I personally would put it in ranking my decks. It feels more powerful than
yeah.
with my other decks. So
Well, I definitely
uh,
think that's more than fair too. So,
well, let's look in and how this deck works. Let's go to our ramp here. Um, I've just highlighted. Obviously, I've got 14 different ramp, but this is the more interesting towards a reanimator strategy.
I see they're
Awakening
mostly creatures too. So,
Awakening Stone is my only ramp that's not a creature, other than Soul Ring, but that's redundant to bring up here. Awakening Zone is going to let us make a creature at the beginning of each upkeep, which is good in a lot of decks, anyways, especially a token deck. Um, but that 0/1 Eldrazi creature we could sack for a colored mana, and in doing so, we increase our experience. So we get a free way to increase our experience every single turn, as well as getting mana. So that synergizes pretty well.
that's really
Next,
important too, because Meren can only increase her experience counters once on your turn, so you really have to make sure you're doing it. You don't want to miss an even a single drop ever.
I'm sorry. I'm not sure what you're trying to say there, Austin. What do you?
Well, I'm saying you
You can
gotta.
increase experience at any time.
You only get the encounter whenever a creature dies on your turn. I thought.
Correct. Whenever another creature you control dies, get an experience counter. Yeah, no, you get them at any time. It doesn't matter when a creature
Oh,
dies, you're going to get that experience counter.
okay.
Uh, but it is very efficient to be able to do it as soon as you cast Meren to start building that up. That way you can guarantee you're going to be able to pull something out immediately. Sakura Tribe Elder is another one that's very, very helpful in making that work. Because not only is it a ramp staple for green, goes and gets a land for 2 mana, uh, but you can sack at any time. So being able to reanimate Sakura Tribuilder, immediately sack it again, helps you essentially build up two experience counters, get 2 lands for just the price of casting it one time. So that's pretty powerful to be able to do that. Skull Prophet is standard ramp, but it's also going to mill us, which is nice to do if we don't need the mana. Death Cap gets Death Touch. I've got another mana dork that gets +3/+2 whenever you have Delirium. So
I think it's a
definitely being able to
werewolf or something.
yeah, I believe it's supposed to be a werewolf. Um, but having these mana dorks that do a little bit more than just being mana dorks
Yeah, like
is nice.
Wayfarer's Bauble. You got Wayfarer's Bauble right there. That
Oh yes, I have 2 Wayfarer's Baubles. Actually, Diligent Farmhand and Dawn Shredder Elk are essentially the same card in this deck, except one of them costs 1 mana. You sack it for 2, you go get a basic. The other costs 2 mana, sack it for 1, go get a basic. So they both fill pretty much the same slot. Um, and then the only other one I would really want to talk about here is Primal Druid. I think most people would say take that out of this deck, but whenever it dies, you go get a land. So it's a little redundant, but I
I think it's
really
better than the
wanted.
ETB trigger maybe because you're getting the double dip of its. You still get the double dip of Meren if something dies that had entered and gets a land like Springbloom
my
Druid.
my goal was to have only land ramp on creatures, and Primal Druid helps me accomplish it. So
Yeah,
otherwise I wouldn't have as much ramp as I would like. So
well, I'm sure you
yeah.
probably have like wood elves in here, I think, or maybe not
No,
since.
I focus super hard. Um, all of my ramp package is 2 mana or less. So except for Spring Blood, I think that might be the only exception there at 3. Um,
Okay.
because I wanted to have my interaction around 2 or 3, so I wanted as much of my ramp to go down earlier as possible. I also have your Llanowar elves and a couple of those adjacent cards just to round it out. Um, but now what are we going to be casting, Austin? We're gonna be casting cards to get us more cards.
Yeah, we're gonna be getting some card advantage with some
So
draw or
I,
sacrifice to draw.
I split up my examples here. The top half we've got cards that are gonna straight up draw us by either sacrificing um, pretty much exclusively sacrificing Triarch, Praetorium, your little Necron card there. He's going to draw us cards whenever we bring him back from the library, specifically. Felstinger brings draws cards whenever he enters, so both of them are going to be cards we're going to want to let die and then bring them back every time we need to draw cards. Smothering Aberration is a flying Eldrazi that we can just sack a card at the beginning of our upkeep in order to draw a card, and every time we sacrifice a creature, we draw a card as well. So he depending on when you get him out, can be pretty good in this deck. What I have on the bottom, um, I have Grim Specs who just draws anytime we draw a card. But you can see I got Satyr Wayfinder, Scowling Gorehound, and Violent Tumor, who these 3 cards, 2 of them are just going to mill us. And Violent Tumor is going to go tutor up anything we want and put it in our grave. So it's not exactly card advantage, but as long as we have Meren or one of our other reanimation, it's sometimes better than drawing a card.
It's pretty good. And something else to note here is like you've got a lot of like reanimation normally does, but you got a lot of different pieces going on. So there's a lot of different ways to interact with things. Like, um, obviously, you have a lot of cards that are going to get you lands and things, and then you can use them later for these other cards. Some of them bring themselves back, or some of them get rid of themselves, or they get rid of other cards. But it's kind of just a big spider web of synergy on what works with what. Kind of because everything works in the graveyard, and you gotta get it there somehow. It's got to go there somehow.
Almost every card you see here has an alternative option at the same price and probably at the same mana cost. You can just kind of look at it and pick your favorites. Like Dockside Chef is probably not on very many Meren lists, but I wanted more 1 drops, and so that kind of just curved out nicely for me, and that's why he's there.
Yeah. Well, sometimes
Uh,
sacrificing the artifact can be specific too. If you ever decide to put the artifact lands in, because then you don't have to have a creature either. So there's just a bunch of different options.
uh, Next, we're going to look at our interaction. I've highlighted my favorite removal pieces here. Foundation Breaker and Shriekmaw are favorites for sure, and they kind of take advantage of Marin's ladder ability because both of them have evoke, and so whenever you evoke them, they enter the battlefield and die immediately, getting us an experience counter if Marin's on the field, and also um, they're gonna either remove a creature or an artifact or enchantment. So Uh, Powerful effect there. And then when the way it plays out a lot of times is we evoke it early before we cast Meren. We remove a small little threat just because we can, get rid of somebody else's mana dork. Then we cast Meren, and that same turn, we get to put one of these back in our hand to be able to evoke it again. So sometimes these are kind of the exception of. Sometimes I kind of prefer to have these in my hand because then I can hold them for when I need them, rather than having them in the grave where they can be, exiled. So,
Yeah,
uh,
and it's worth pointing out. I mean, it's Shriek Maw is basically a Doomblade, and Foundation Breaker is basically a naturalized. So them being on a creature that also gives you the die trigger is pretty good. Obviously, their mana cost is a little lopsided because of the invoke, but since you can revive them, like you said, or just keep using the invoke, that's kind of okay. That downside doesn't actually usually come up here.
no, Arctic Slime and Noxious Gear Hulk are basically the exact same cards, but without the evoke, better bodies, and just redundancy there. But they both essentially do the same thing. One of them can get us. The Arctic Slime has Death Touch and can destroy a land.
I think you
Where
mean
that Death Touch
acidic slime.
acidic or is it acidic?
It is.
Okay,
It is
I don't know
it's
how
a
to read.
it's a nasty ooze. It fears no sword and leaves no bones.
But not only does it destroy an enchantment artifact or a land when it enters, but that Death Touch can kind of function as a deterrence. People don't want to attack you because you're probably going to kill something. And the Noxious Gear Hulk is just a 5/4 Menace who also Doomblades, or not Doomblades, just destroys anything when he enters. And you gain life, which
Yeah,
is very helpful as I've mentioned in this deck. Also,
the
funny enough,
Skyfisher. I was about to
Skyfisher is
say,
a new addition to this deck, and whenever it enters, you may sacrifice a creature, building up that experience, destroy a target non-land permanent, and whenever it dies, you may choose to exile it, and if you do, you gain life equal to the cards in your grave. Just a nice little option there. But otherwise, it's another good version of. Not only is it kind of a repeatable removal like the other four cards, but it also sacrifices when it enters as well. So um, it can help you build up those experience numbers a little quicker as well.
yeah. Well, and these are all your cards that target mostly one card, even if you can do it more than once. I guess let's look at your cards that can target lots of cards.
I actually have a pretty good bit in this deck. I have six, maybe even seven, depending on how you count them. I've got two cards here with Knight Incarnate and Elvish Dread Lord that when one of them die, actually both of them, when either of them dies, all creatures are gonna get -3/-3 till end of turn. Now there are probably better effects for this, but -3/-3 is significant because Meren is a 3/4, so Meren's not gonna die whenever these activate.
Yeah, and because it's the minus minus, it's gonna get rid of any indestructibles that go under with the minus. But also, it could help for combat too, because then for the rest of any kind of combat that turn, uh, your opponent's or creatures are gonna have -3/-3, so it could make them easier to kill or easier
These
for them to get killed.
Exactly. Now these two are very strong deterrents, both having death touch, and your opponents know that if they attack and kill them, then they're probably going to lose some creatures too. So a lot of times people avoid you when you have those on the field. Bane of Progress is a pretty solid reanimation target. Whenever it enters, destroy all artifacts and enchantments, and it gets +1/+1 for each. You could
Honestly,
argue this is an auto include in a lot of green decks, but
I think
uh,
so, and honestly, I'm surprised it's not on the list of game changers quite yet, because it's quite easy to reanimate in decks like this, and has quite the lopsided effect if your deck isn't prepared. Because most decks are running artifacts and enchantments.
we played Commander just a few days ago with our friend group, and I think every game had two or three artifact based decks. So something like a Bane of Progress could definitely these days when every deck seemingly is a saga deck or an enchantment deck or artifact, it does a lot of work.
Yeah, once you
Uh,
start adding keywords to things, they start becoming more vulnerable to the older cards that used to just get just those.
Gix's command is one of my favorites. Four modes, choose two. One of them being take something from the grave, put it in your hand. Two of the modes are gonna either destroy each creature power two or less, or your opponents have to sacrifice their highest power. So in a lot of cases, you're pretty well clearing the board there, and then you put counters on something, which doesn't matter too much in this deck. Necromantic Selection just blanket destroys all creatures. Then you get to return a creature destroyed this way under your control. So a
Which,
little
if
bit of
you
reanimation on a board wipe. 7 mana is steep, but it's pretty good for this deck.
yeah, well, and something that we didn't quite touch on is you can reanimate your Meren, so you don't have to have her go back to the command zone, which means if you necromantic selection choosing her and you have enough experience counters, you're going to reanimate another card alongside her, and like you said, sometimes you can chain a few more, so the necromantic selection might not be the worst thing in some board states, honestly.
Yeah, it can really be as you said, getting Meren off of it makes it a lot better than like in Garuk's Wake, where sometimes green doesn't have the best board wipes,
Yeah,
or even black for that matter. So
but
works works out fine.
you do also have some other cards that you can grab other than Meren, like
Right. So here's some of the
Soccer
cards.
Tribe Elder.
Well, some of the things we didn't get to mention in some of the other slides. Obviously, a Massacre Worm would go here, um, but we'll talk about what we do. What we do have here. Puppeteer Click is one of my favorites. Um, it has Persist. So whenever it dies, it comes back to the battlefield with a -1/-1 counter. Well, since we got quite a few sack outlets in this deck, what Puppeteer Click does is when it enters the battlefield, return target creature from an opponent's grave to the battlefield under your control. It has haste and it dies at the end step. So, what
And
you
it,
can essentially do
when it
is
exiles it too, which will
it does
get rid of it.
But since we run sack outlets in this deck, what's going to happen is you're going to cast your Puppeteer Click, you're going to steal an opponent's creature, you're going to sack your Puppeteer Click, you're going to steal another one, you're going to attack with both of those creatures, then you're going to sack them all, that way you can do it again next turn. And you're going to build your experience counters, you're going to reanimate Puppeteer Click with Meren, setting it back to not having the -1/-1 counter. That way you can just keep looping it. It's a pretty fun little tech there.
Yeah, you're gonna use
Sacred
Gix.
Elder.
You use
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Gix's. Or you're gonna put the counters on it from Gix's command to cancel out the -1/-1 counter on
That is the only time you would ever use the plus counters on Gix in this deck. Because yeah, that's a fun little interaction there. Sakura Tribe Elder is here for the same reason Spore Frog is here, is because very early game it's going to help you build those experience counters, and then essentially you're gonna be ramping for free every turn, which is pretty helpful to try to get to those 7 and 8 mana costs. If you can't get them in your graveyard, then you're gonna have to hard cast them, and Sacred Tribeller makes it very easy to do that. Spore Frog, along the same lines, has a free sacrifice ability to prevent combat damage. Um, and so just having that in your toolbox, being able to, at whenever you need to, protect yourself from combat.
it's pretty good.
Pretty nice.
It's gonna make people really want to exile it. And I see you've got Gary and Sir Conrad here, which are just I mean those are pretty common staples in any black deck, but also reanimation. They can both be
Yeah,
pretty devastating on life totals.
Sir Conrad is a card that, even though he doesn't have an effect on himself entering the battlefield, anytime he's in my grave, people rush to exile it because I mean he's the bane of any black deck really, or in the bane whenever you're playing against a black deck. Sir Conrad is the thing you're afraid of, and there's no different in this deck. Genji, I wanted to bring up again because not only can he reanimate, but a very fun loop with Genji is whenever he dies, each opponent discards 2 cards and loses 2 life. So you can really win the game.
Make him die a couple
Yeah,
times.
make him die and make him have no way to stop you from making him die. There's been a couple of games where my opponents had no cards in hand because of Genji.
Yeah, once you get to the late game, if no one's drawing and you keep discarding two like that, people are gonna start to go negative and they're gonna end up with that big fat zero. Why don't we take a look at your deck stats overall? Because, like we talked about, you've got quite a few creatures and stuff in here, but let's look and see kind of like what your mana curve looks like overall.
So overall, I feel like you got a little bit of bump there in the curve. I mean, as most commanders, you're gonna curve out at 2 or 3. You could see I got 10 1 manas, and I specifically wanted that to make it easier to always have something I can sacrifice, and then no matter what, when I cast Meren on turn 3 or 4, I'm gonna have something I can reanimate immediately. Uh, and then I do have a little bit of more on the high end in this deck, more 6s and 7s than I would use in most. But because of the mill and being able to get cards back for free from the grave, it smooths out pretty nicely. Do you have any thoughts on? I mean, have you ever seen me not be able to cast something in this deck, Austin? It seems like it's a pretty smooth curve, I would say.
No, really, I don't think I've seen you have any kind of mana curve issues. Obviously, you've got cards like Sakura Tribe Elder that you're getting all the lands from, and those are kind of low. And a lot of your dorks, like you said, I think you have like a 2 CMC or lower on like most of your mana production or land ramp. And even though you only have, surprisingly, you have less green than black, which I'm actually a little surprised by. I thought it might be the other way around, where you have
To be honest, I was a little
more
surprised.
green.
It's really front heavy with the green, and then the top end is black. Since the
Yeah,
mana
and
is
and that makes
get the
sense.
green, get the lands, then cast all your big scary demons.
Yeah, that makes sense. You might double look at some of the green big top end cards too, though, because they may have made a few more that you might be more interested in. Because I see you really got. I think you. It's definitely lopsided, like you said.
Well, remind me of that thought in just a second, because there's definitely no shortage of things you could put in this deck.
For
Uh,
sure.
let's look at our deck list real quick.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have anything I'd really want to mention other than the 35 lands is probably a little shorter than it needs to be. I think it's showing you 33 there. I do have 2 modals, but there's been several untapped modals added in the last couple of years that I just haven't looked and added to every deck I own. But definitely could easily bump me up a couple of points in the land department just to smooth things out even more.
Yeah, and I definitely see too. Back to that being a progress. One artifact, 2 enchantments. So at least damaging to you almost all at all times. So I mean, it's really not ever gonna do that much to you. You're just gonna get rid of maybe 1 or 2 cards, and your opponents are gonna lose way more than that. I think maybe you've got 1 or 2 creatures that are also an enchantment, like the Dockside Chef. Maybe there's another one on here, but the Bane of Progress is gonna definitely work out well. Um, I don't really think. I know you talked about the MDFCs, which yeah, you could definitely add a couple more in there that are just kind of probably good over some of the forest or swamps. But I think you've kind of talked about all the bigger things. I can't really see anything here that I like would wanna point out.
The only thing I didn't really get to capitalize on this explanation is I have a few cards like Sir Conrad, so I showed off Sir Conrad, but I have Massacre Worm and a uh, some kind of hound from Theros that all or no Amonkhet, if I believe remember correctly. All three of them are going to ping your opponent every time you have a creature die, which does add up a lot in this kind of deck. But otherwise, I mean, you assume I'm gonna have those kinds of cards, so I don't know that I have to talk about them, but they're in there.
Yeah, well, we talked about, it's definitely a creature heavy deck because I think counting Meren, you're gonna have 48, which is it's almost half the entire pile. So, um, I mean, that's what you want though. You want everything on your creatures, and you want to bring your creatures back. So, I think, in conclusion,
Meren essentially lets you play with your graveyard as an extension of your hand. Um, this provides you with a wider toolbox of options, meaning you're gonna have always gonna have access to that card when you need it. And if you use it and you need it again, there it is. A lot. I know some decks probably have to run more redundancy as far as draw or removal, but when you can just use the same removal repeatedly, you don't have to worry about drawing it as long as you keep that grave from being interacted with, which, as you know, Austin, is going to be probably the hardest thing to do in this deck.
yeah, from anything from a Bajuka Bog to a Return to Nature, people are usually antsy whenever it comes to your graveyard. Just like you said with Sir Conrad, seeing it is believing it, and they're believing that there's a threat. Uh, if it's in the grave, it's targetable, and it's usually going to get got. And once it's exiled, there's really no way to bring it back. But that's why you have to put more cards in the grave, and that's obviously why you have so many creatures in the deck. Is to kind of is to fall back on top of that. Um, and I mean, that's all graveyard strategy decks. And I see obviously like Meren is a good graveyard strategy deck, and obviously I think she's the top Gilgari commander.
I believe she's the top Golgari
So,
commander currently, as of the date we're recording, 33 rank of all commanders on EDH Rec.
which
And,
is
and I
10.
think a large part of that, sorry to cut you off there, but I
No, you're
wanted to say,
fine.
I think the large reason for that is you could change almost every card I have here and still make a reanimator deck with Meren. There's so many different alternatives that you could have here that'll do essentially the same thing, but in a different way and maybe a more flavorful or fun way to you. Obviously, it's budget, so some of these cards I have better versions, but in a budget, even then, you still got quite a few options to choose from.
Yeah, and all I was gonna say is, I mean, Meren has been out for 10 years. It's she came out in 2000. Or I'm sorry, yeah, 2015. So I mean, there's been plenty of time for them to print a better Gilgari deck or better commander, and for people to choose one. And it seems like that's the direction they want to go with the Gilgari. And like you said, even on a budget, there's stuff in here that you're gonna find Gray Merchant of Asphodel in every single Meren deck. Like you will not find it in a deck unless people are trying to power it down. Um, it doesn't matter what the budget is. So it all in all, I think it's a pretty good deck. I think you've been playing it for a few years now, and I know you've got quite a dozen few games in with it, and it's always interesting to see at the table for sure.
Yes, sir. That's another commander in the books. We'll see y'all next time.
See ya.